Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today I have another wonderful guest. As ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, it's me sharing ideas, insights, and best practices for building professional relationships and excelling at business networking. Occasionally, however, I have subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, and social scientists, and they help us better understand how this whole networking and relationship thing works. Today, our guest, Lynn Franklin, I asked her about a time when she needed to build better relationships at work. And she said that she was a counselor in a home for troubled boys at one point. And one of the kids, a 14-year-old named was Fred, threatened to kill her with a machete. If you're not familiar with what a machete is, it's like a really long knife. I grew up in the country. I get what a machete is. That's terrifying. And then what Fred did was he chopped the phone cord, which was Lynn's really only lifeline to get help, and told her that if she tried to call for help, he would cut her too. 20 minutes later, probably the longest 20 minutes of Lynn's life, after she did some fast talking and sweated through everything she had on, Fred gave her the machete. And she says now that's the litmus test for her job. As long as no one's pulling machete on her, she's having a good day. Well, I think that's a great story. But Lynn's a leadership communication expert and coach, past president of the National Speaker Association, Illinois chapter. She wrote a book called Getting Others to Do What You Want. In addition, she has a TEDx talk out there on how to be a mind reader, and that went viral and has over 5 million views. Lynn, I'm glad you could join us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Frank.
I don't know that you need to talk me out of getting rid of any weapons.
I'm grateful for that.
Yes. Now, was that the end of your stint in the home for troubled boys?
Well, I did not leave the next day, but I have to admit, the half-life on that job was about 6 months. So a year and a day, 1 broken nose and 3 cracked ribs later, I decided to get out of social work.
Oh my gosh.
And went probably to the polar opposite of what you would go to. So from there, I started working for a weekly banking magazine.
Okay.
So I was writing about banking, and I have to laugh because I'd never had a finance course, an economics course, or an accounting course. And I remember the first day out on the job, and it was in Minneapolis. They sent me to interview 3 women investment bankers, and one of them was talking about Fannie Mae, and I knew it wasn't the candy, but I had no clue.
Okay. So you just faked it through, huh?
Well, then I went back to my office and did some research to figure out what it was she was talking about. Although today, I'm still not quite sure I know what Fannie Mae does.
Yeah, well, that makes 2 of us. We're not in mortgage. Your book, Getting Others to Do What You Want. It sounds like you're very good at getting other people to do what you want. You got a machete from Fred. Is there a correlation between those?
Well, and what Fred did, fortunately for me, what Fred taught me was an abiding interest in how to reach unreachable people. How do you connect with people who don't necessarily want to connect with you? And that's been something that's followed me around in my entire career. And my latest iteration of it is neuroscience, of all things. And the idea is, if you want to connect with people, understanding how their brains work can be really useful. Mm-hmm. And because the whole idea behind, getting others to do what you want is knowing what's in it for them and being able to present that idea in a way they can see it, hear it, and feel it, and then make a good decision about whether or not what you're proposing is actually the right thing for them to do. And the whole neuroscience end of it is understanding that everybody will resist you. Even people who want to agree with you will resist you. That's just how our brains work. And the way to move them beyond resisting is, frankly, to ask good questions, listen to what they have to tell you, and then when it's your time to speak, frame whatever points you want to share in a way that appeals to them.
It sounds easier than it is, certainly when you're being threatened. But there's a lot of logic to that. I mean, we as humans we're animals. We've had a development process as a species, if you will, hundreds, maybe not hundreds of thousands of years, tens of thousands of years for sure. And there's a whole lot to that. And I think that's certainly a point that I try to drive home often on this podcast, is that there's really no magic to this stuff. But it's easier said than done often.
And to build on that point, it's true, because 100,000 years ago, when we were all living in caves, the scoop is that our brain had one job, and that was to keep us alive. So our brain was constantly scanning the horizon, looking for physical and verbal risks and threats and getting us out of the way, which means that whenever you propose a new idea to anyone, part of their brain is trying to figure out just how risky is this idea. Will it get me in trouble? In other words, will it kill me? And so, for me, it's all right, just relax. The world is going to resist you. That's just how our brains have evolved over the years. Let it go, and then find a way to connect to the person. And as I said, it's usually by asking good questions and listening to the answers and framing what it is that you want the person to remember in a way that will make it easy for them to get it.
To me, it sounds like you really have to exercise a degree of patience with this. I think a lot of people, when they get out into networking, which is akin to sales, they see the end in mind and they want to move you there right away. And in many ways, that's counterproductive.
Well, and we've all stood in the doorway of a networking event. And I remember early on when I was learning how to network as well. And the idea of, and of course, now I'm going to date myself. Long ago and far away, there was a musical called, now I'm a chorus line. And the song that would always play through my head as I was standing in the doorway of a networking event is, I need to get new business. I'm networking to get new business. And I would stand in the doorway, and the song that would play in my head is, I really need this job. Oh God, I need this job, from a chorus line. And, and I would go in looking for business. And of course, that kind of desperation just turns off everybody, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And so it took me a while to make the shift of, no, I'm not here to get business. I'm here, and I literally go into every networking event, virtual or actual, with one goal in mind, which is to, number one, to have 3 interesting conversations, and 2, the second part of that is to walk away with at least 2 people I would like to talk to again. It's got nothing to do with business. It's got to do with interesting conversations. And that takes the pressure off of me and makes networking so much more fun. And ultimately much more useful, because people will tell I'm there, to have a good conversation, which means I want to listen to them and I want to learn new things and I want to share the stuff that works for me. And if that's the case, then I've just made myself, for lack of a better phrase, much more attractive in a room where other people are trying to sell you. Because how many times have we had somebody foist her card upon us and then just talk our ear off. And then as soon as she's finished talking about what she does, thank us for our time, and then move on to talk somebody else's ear off. And we're standing there with this card thinking, I never want to talk to this person again.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned that people often make a big mistake the moment they open their mouths at networking events.
Right. And
what's coming out of that mouth?
Well, there you go. And because I'm a neuroscience nerd, I've got another tip to share with people, which is, it starts with a question. And let me ask you, Frank, have you ever gone to a networking event and started speaking with somebody that you know or don't know, and then about 2 minutes in realize you cannot for the life of you remember that person's name? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me explain the neuroscience behind what's going on and what to do about it. So what we usually do, and this is our biggest mistake, is the first thing we do out of the box is we introduce ourselves. Hi, my name is. And the scoop is what neuroscience tells us is the first 7 seconds after we meet a new person, our brain is overwhelmed with information. So our conscious mind can only process between 10 to 50 bits of information per second. And so your brain is overwhelmed. And for some reason, the first thing we notice about people is their hair, and then it's their body language and their clothes and how they sound and how, and the other features of how they look. And that's when we're introducing ourselves and they're introducing themselves. Our brain is overwhelmed. We do not have the bandwidth. So it just throws out their name. And on top of that, research shows that names have no inherent meaning in our brains unless we can make an immediate association with them. So if I say to you, hi, my name is Lynn, and you have a sister named Lynn, okay. But if I say, hi, my name's Norma, and you never met a Norma before in your life, your brain just throws it out. So your brain is conspiring against you to remember somebody's first name. And on top of that, people's first name, the most important word in the English language to them. Mm-hmm. So your brain is now shooting you in the foot, so you cannot remember the most important name for the word in the language then. So I say, use the 7-second rule. Now that you know you don't have the bandwidth, never ask somebody's name when you meet them. Instead, make a statement like, boy, it sure is gray outside today. I was hoping for a sunny day. And let that person respond, or ask them a question such as, oh, is this the first time you've ever been to an event like this? And let them answer it. And by the time they're done, you'll know that 7 seconds have gone by. And now your brain has calmed down and is ready to focus. And that's when you look at them and ask their name. And people will usually tell you their first and last names. They don't care about their last name. Forget that. Just focus on their first name. And then look them in the eyes and say the first name a couple of times in a sentence. And now you've moved it from your short-term into your long-term memory. It's a great system for remembering people's first names so that you don't have that agita when, 5 minutes from now, your friend comes over and wants to be introduced to this person you're talking to, and you cannot for the life of you remember this person's name, and you are tap dancing because you cannot see their name tag.
Yeah, no, I like that advice. Yeah, I've been stumped. I think everybody has. Mm-hmm. I've faked it. Anymore, if it happens, and it doesn't happen often, I sort of have a system like yours. I'll just fess up. I forgot your name.
Yep.
Right. Because I think that's everybody understands that. Nobody's put out by that. The fact that you care, people like. I like the waiting 7 seconds. I have done the clarification thing. Is it Robert or Bob? Just something like that. Just clarify. And then I try to use it. But I like the notion of getting beyond the overwhelm, if you will, of sensory overload, right? Okay, they're wearing this. They've got a lapel pin. Where do I go with this? Who are they? What do they do? And just, sit back and relax and let those 7 seconds pass. Mm-hmm. Great advice. How can we be more persuasive when we're presenting our ideas at work? You're working with lead. Go ahead.
And I truly believe it's something that we started talking about a little earlier, and that is because I've worked with CEOs and CFOs of public companies for most of my career. So, C-suite folks, and explaining to them how to connect with the people who report to them, and also with investors and shareholders and the media. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen business leaders perfect their message and practice it so it's got this fine sheen to it, and then stand in front of the world and unleash their message and be shocked every single time that nobody cares. So our messages too often are all about us. Do this because this is the best way to do it. And the idea is literally pay attention to who people are, what they want, and then frame your message in that way. So, for me, it's all about goal setting. Like I mentioned, when I go into a networking situation, hey, it's have a couple of interesting conversations and walk away with some names of people I want to speak with Again, that's my goal. And, and do that the same thing for presentations. What's the goal? And then take a look at the people who are going to be in this situation with you, whether or not it's one or several. And I literally sit down beforehand when I'm going to do a presentation, and I ask questions and answer questions. And I do it longhand because that's easier. That helps my brain remember it. When you sit and write something down, it moves things from your short-term into your long-term memory. And the idea is ask questions like, what are they afraid of? And what do they want? And when I understand these things, along with other questions I'll ask myself, it becomes, all right, so how is my perspective going to help them either avoid something that they don't want to happen or get to something that they do? And it's also about the idea of not rushing in to create a solution. It's just like what you were talking about before, Frank, is you don't come in to sell anybody anything. You come in to listen first, because listening does wonderful things for you. The first thing is that people will give you all kinds of information that will be valuable to you when it's your turn to speak. So you get to gather data on what are the things that are important to them, or what are the things that they don't want to have happen in their lives. And the second thing about listening is that it often prompts something. It's another neuroscience nerd thing called the Rule of Reciprocity. If you've been asking me questions and I've been talking to you for a while, there will come a point when I realize, geez, I've been talking for a long time, and Frank's done such a good job listening, and I want to reciprocate. So then I'll ask you questions, and I will be interested in the answer because you've modeled the behavior that I will ultimately want to adopt. So it becomes, don't create this message that you want to share, or this product that you want to sell, or this service that you want to market to somebody. Don't do this stuff in a vacuum. People will tell you all day long what it is that they need if you will just listen. So don't rush to, hey, I'm Lynn, and this is what I do, and here's why you need it. No, I haven't built enough trust with you for you to care. But if I listen well, and then when there is an opportunity to say, I was working with somebody with the same kind of problem, and here's what that person did, then you'll be more interested in that than, hey, here's what I think you ought to do, because I haven't earned the right to give you advice yet.
And I think I don't want to say the average person, many people will say, well, what if they don't reciprocate? My response always is, okay, you just know that you just don't need to invest any more time in them. You can't force them. They're not going to listen anyways.
Mm-hmm. I call it catch and release. Yeah, because it's in that moment when you realize that, no, this is not the right person. And it's not that they could never work with you or refer you to somebody else. They're just not interested in it. And so it's in that moment that I say, well, thank you so much for your time. It's been interesting getting to know you. And I'm sure that there are other people here that you want to talk with as well. Enjoy the rest of the meeting, and smile and nod my head and then walk away.
Now, a little off topic, but we're talking neuroscience. You seem to be very adept in it. Group size. You ever talk to people in corporations about group size? I'm a fan of less is more, right? I mean, I don't need, the more people, just the more complicated. I don't know if those things ever come up in your conversations with people.
Well, there are some. It depends upon what it is that you want to create for them. And so a lot of times I will do presentation training, and there's some things that you can do in a group setting. But one of the things I frequently do is I video people, so they can see, if they want to improve their presentation style. The most eye-opening and frankly the most frightening thing you can ever do is videotape yourself. And I will never put somebody through videoing any kind of presentation in front of other people, because it's just too vulnerable.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of things like, how do you create a presentation that anybody will want to listen to? And how do you answer the questions about who are these people and what do they want and what are they afraid of? That stuff I can do in a group. But when it comes to the real vulnerable stuff, that's the one-on-one thing. And, and particularly because, and I laugh when I do presentation coaching, because I say, all right, now we're going to look at this video and you're going to hate yourself. That's just how it is, because you're going to sit there and you're going to compare yourself to everybody you've ever seen on TV, read the evening news, or do a program. And guess what? Those people get paid millions of dollars to do this. You are not like them. So give it up. And even people who do this kind of stuff, there are things that they don't like about their appearance. I remember, Katie Couric being asked what she didn't like about her face. And she said, when I smile, I lose my entire upper lip. And I thought, nobody in the world would be paying attention to that. But she's a professional. So I say, instead, when you do this kind of thing, when you make yourself vulnerable, you're looking for two things in presentation training. One, what are the things you do that make it easier for people to agree with you and believe you? And two, what are the things that you do that make it harder? And then we just work on the stuff that makes it harder. But nobody needs to be that vulnerable in front of other people. So you're right. Depending upon what it is that you want to create, either doing things in a group or doing things in a large group or a small group or one-on-one, has to track with what it is that you want to create for them.
Okay. I've heard you say that, we need to design our virtual and in-person meetings around how the brain works. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, and so here's something I know, because we've already talked about how people get overwhelmed in that first 7 seconds. There are a couple of other things that are useful to know when we're talking about designing meetings. And one of them is that people can only hold 3 ideas in their short-term memory before it gets full. 3. So if you walk into a meeting with the 5 or 7 or 10 things that you want people to remember, but when the meeting is over, by the time you get to number 4, chances are good they've lost number 1 and you're standing in number 2. So I say 3. Don't go more than 3 if you want people to remember something, because their brains just get overwhelmed. So that's the number of topics. And so I call it the rule of 3. Don't go over 3. And then I've got the rule of 20, which is that their short-term memories can only hold about 20 minutes worth of content before they get full. That's it, 20 minutes. So I say, if you're doing an agenda, every topic, 20 minutes max. And then when you reach that 20-minute mark, people's brains are done. And then what you do is you take that subject and you kind of wrap it up into a bow. So it could be you summarize the important points that have been made, or you summarize the next steps that people have agreed to do, whatever it is. And you tie that stuff in a bow, which allows them then to move that information from their short-term memory into their long-term memory, which frees up more space for the next topic you're going to cover. So 20 minutes max on any particular topic before people's brains are full. And within that 20 minutes, I say, apply the rule of 7. Which is that people can only sit and listen to a talking head for about 7 minutes before they take a brain vacation. From a neuroscience standpoint, what you're supposed to do every minute is called a state change. You have to change the energy level in the room, virtual or actual. And you can do it by simple things like asking people to raise their hands or clap for something, or ask each other questions, or imagine something, or write in the chat, whatever. But the idea is create some kind of engagement every 7 minutes to keep people in the room. And that way, because they're engaged, number one, you'll get better information exchanged by people who are in the room, and the time will go faster for them, because they're not being bored out of their gourd from because we all sat in those college courses, didn't we? Or high school, even, where the teacher just talked forever, and our brains were full of 20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So to clarify this, the rule of 3, okay. You hit one subject and you go for 20 minutes. With the rule of 7 in that 20 minutes, breaking things up at 7-minute marks along the way. So you'd have 3 different segments in that 20 minutes. And then you'd go to another segment of your second segment. Again, no more than 20 minutes, breaking it up into segments of 7 minutes roughly. No more than 7 minutes. So I guess it's entirely possible to have 4 5-minute segments or something like that, but as long as you're kind of shifting gears. And okay. Very interesting.
Yeah. And the only clarification I'd add is in that first 20 minutes or second and third 20 minutes, you can do 3 topics. So the brain can handle 3 topics in 20 minutes, and you can actually have 3 subtopics beneath each of those 3.
Gotcha.
But don't have 4 or 5.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Shifting gears, because that's what we do. You taught me to do. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your business and how people can help you. Types of work you're doing, one-on-one types of things. You do group sorts of things. If you would elaborate on those, and then certainly how people can get a hold of you.
Well, thanks for asking, Frank. And I say I do basically 3 buckets. See, already you see I'm using the rule of 3. So
Yes.
3 buckets. The first bucket is one-on-one leadership communication coaching. So, for example, I was hired by the chairman of a company down in Dallas who wanted to bring the president up and elevate him. He was the next person in line. And the chairman had told the president, it'll take you about 3 years to get to the point where you can take over my job. And the president wasn't all that sure he wanted to wait out those 3 years because the chairman was pretty controlling. And so, among other things, I suggested to him, okay, every time you have a new idea on how to help the company grow, I want you to go to the chairman and say, look, I know you've said that this is a goal that you want to reach. I found a way to help us get there faster. Are you interested? And who's going to say no? And so what ends up happening then is that you present, in this case, the president presents his ideas as though it's a solution to one of the chairman's needs. And literally after 9 months of doing this, the chairman came back to the president and said, you're doing such a great job that we're going to move you up in a year and a half. We're going to cut the succession planning time in half. So I say that's the power of communication. And this guy, in this instance, one-on-one, he's going to where he wants to get faster because he became a better communicator. So one-on-one leadership communication coaching is one space I play in. The second bucket is workshops. So I do these either for organizations or for associations. I was working with the loan syndication department of an international bank. And I had to laugh because you'll like this too. The head of the department brought me in and said, I want you to do a program on how my people need to follow their processes and procedures. And at that moment, I stuck my hand to my mouth and yawned because I was already bored with that idea. And I said, that's great. But what I'd love to do is talk to your people and find out what they need. And he said, my people have been surveyed to death. They won't do a survey. I said, fine, I'll just do 10-minute phone conversations with each of them. And one of the things I discovered is that loan syndication, not surprisingly, is highly regulated, and there are lots of hoops they have to jump through. But the people that they're working at the bank don't have those kinds of regulations. So they're more relationship people. And they're the ones who are connected to the companies that either get included in the loan syndication or the ones who buy the loan syndication after it's pulled together. And so the people in the loan syndication department, very data driven. So they would say to the relationship people, I need this data by this point. But the relationship people aren't motivated by deadlines. They're motivated by how good they look in front of their client. And if they'd already talked to the client that day, well, they're not going to call the client because then they look foolish in front of the client. And so what would end up happening is that the loan syndication people wouldn't get the information that they needed in a timely way from the relationship manager. And then they would backdoor it and try to find it some other way. And I said to him, okay, the scoop here is that you just taught all of these relationship managers that you ask them for information. And if they don't get it to you, you find it some other way. So you're going to do their job. Why should they bother to do anything that you ask them to do?
Right.
And so the new strategy that they are using is at the end of every loan syndication deal, the loan syndication people go back to the relationship managers and say, I'm sure that there are things I could have done to have made this experience better for you and your client. And I would love to know what those things are. And then shut up and listen to what they have to say. And so as the relationship managers share those things, write them down. And then at the end of that, of course, the relationship manager is waiting for them to say, yeah, and here are the things that you should have done that make my job easier. Don't go there. Just thank them for their time and let them know the next time you work with them, then you will keep these things in mind. And sure enough, the next time you work with them, call them up and say, hey, these were the things that you told me were important and I need to focus on them. And I want you to know that I've remembered these things. And by the way, my job is also to make you look like a rock star in front of your client. So if there's any way that I can do that during this process, let me know and I'll be happy to give that a try. And already things have gotten smoother because now they're modeling the behavior that they want to see from the relationship people. It's that rule of reciprocity again. So for me, it's programs on difficult conversations or being more persuasive or effective storytelling or breaking down communication silos. That's the kind of stuff I love to do with organizations or with associations. And the third bucket is really odd. I call it culture communication. And the reason I got into this was because a guy who'd been president of a healthcare company for about 9 months, his mentor said to him, you need to do a better job of internal communication. So just spend a day with Lynn. So we spent a day together. And at the end of the day, I said to him, okay, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to put together your fourth quarter communication plan. You've already told me what your goals are for the fourth quarter. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create segmented messages for the different audiences you need to reach internally. So they're your direct reports, they're the heads of all the buildings, all the different people all the way down the line. And I'll create messages for each of them. I'll create how you're going to deliver these messages and a timeline for doing that. And I handed him the plan and I said, good luck and God bless. It was about halfway through the quarter, he called me and he said, can I just get a regular dose of you so that I can stay on track? And we sat down that December and I said, what's the gift you want to give your people while you're there and in the future, even when you're not? And he said, I want to create a culture of collaboration because we've got these 23 different skilled care nursing buildings. They're all siloed. So people in building A know how to do a great job of onboarding new employees and people in building B, not so much. And I would love it if these people would talk to each other. And frankly, everybody hates corporate. So I would love them to see that we're all part of something bigger. So I said, hand me your operational goals and your financial goals for the coming year, and I will create this plan writ large about what are we going to say to the different target audiences to reach your goals? When are we going to say this stuff? And so every quarter we sit down and meet and talk about whether the progress that we made or didn't make on the plan for the quarter, how we're going to tweak the messages and what we're going to do in the coming quarter. And after the first year of this plan, this company blew past its financial goals. Its people they met all their operational and operational goals as well. And turnover was significantly lower, and the survey showed that job satisfaction was much higher. And I call this culture communication. Have people at the top talk the walk so everybody else can walk the talk.
Gotcha.
So those are the things I love to do.
It sounds like you're very passionate. Best way to get a hold of you?
Best way is usually through email, Lynn, Lynne, at lynnfranklin.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn, which is also lynnfranklin.com, or Lynn Franklin, excuse me, and website, lynnfranklin.com, or my phone number, which is 847-729-5716. So it's one of those things where great communication helps you reach your goals faster. And it's my passion to help people get to where they want to go.
Well, I appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Frank. And I appreciate all the stuff you do with helping people do a better job of networking and connecting with each other.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.